So the idea for tonight's Zoom is to go over the next unit, which is starting to focus on CSS and typography. And then I'm going to talk about the assignment. So the assignment is called Mundane Moment. And I want you to start to think about how you can combine image and type in different ways. So basically, you're going to pick a simple everyday moment in your life. So for my example, let me switch over. I'm going to stop sharing. I picked this pocket calculator, pocket operator, actually, little synthesizer. So I took a bunch of photos. So let me go back and I'll show you the photos. So I took a bunch of photos of this thing. So that's all you really need to do. So I have photos here, but I did spend some time manipulating these photos, creating variations in size, playing with them in Photoshop. And so the idea is one of these web pages would be more image heavy, a lot more images, image dominant, and the other page would be type dominant. And oops, I don't think I switched over. So here are examples of the images I took. Just use your iPhone. So it could be an everyday, you know, it could be a walk outside, it could be eating a sandwich, it could be an everyday occurrence that's just a mundane moment where you can basically get like 6 or 7 photos within a couple minutes, right? And you use those for the image heavy site. So when you work on this assignment, you're going to have 2 project directories, 2 folders. You'll have a type dominant and you'll have an image dominant, and then you'll have your index.html and your images folder. And in each one is going to have images, but your type dominant is going to be mostly typography, and your image dominant is going to be mostly images. So you're going to have those 2 options. If you look at the assignment, it goes through what I want you to submit. So basically, you're going to submit 2 websites, screenshots of the websites, do a screenshot, and the code. You don't have to do a wireframe. You don't have to do a mood board. This is more of an exploration. And you're going to use a lot of Photoshop, but you'll use a little bit of CSS. If you look in Discord, I've started to make a bunch of tiny little movies called these code snippets, focused on the different types of properties in CSS and how to use them and how to create them. So there's a basic CSS one, and if you go through this.
All right, so here I'm going to show you how to create a.
And actually mute that for a little bit. But this is going step by step how to create the code. In this example, it's for a class. So you create a style tag. So here's a style tag, and inside that style tag, you create what's called a class. So it's just a word that you pick. So I picked the word blue, it doesn't matter. It has a little period in front of it. The period means that that's for a class. And then you have your property. So color is a property. If you look in Canvas, I have all these properties for typography. So focusing on type first. But if I make this color property blue, and the value is actually, it can be a number, but with colors, you can actually pick words. So there's a bunch of reserved words in CSS and HTML. And now if I go into the body here, and I have a P tag, I can have that P tag have a class attribute. So you type the word class, you have it equal to that word that you created earlier in the style, and you put it in quotes. So once you do that, P class equals blue in quotes, which reflects the style that you created. If you look at this, the lightning bolt And the results here are going to be blue text. So you made that text blue. So I'll kind of go through that a little bit, but a lot of these videos now are set up in Discord. So there'll be a basic CSS, there'll be a web typography series, which I'll go through some of the properties. And plus, this is all going to be in Canvas. So if you go into Canvas, but it's kind of a bit of work in progress. I've never gone this detailed before. I'm sorry, that's my other class. Let me go into web design. So if you go into module 4 here, I kind of take you through the early beginnings of modifying type using just HTML. This is kind of like almost like a little history. We don't use this anymore. But the next page, I talk about image dominance, and this is what we can use as inspiration for the assignment. And then I talk about style sheets and what style sheets are. There's 3 types. So I just showed you what's called a internal style sheet. So if you use a style tag in your boilerplate code and it goes within the head tag, that's an internal style sheet. There's also external style sheets, and I'll get into those later, and inline style sheets. But for right now, I would just focus on internal style sheets. So this right here is the anatomy of a style sheet. So you have curly braces, and you have what's outside of the curly braces. What's outside of the curly braces, that's your selector. What's inside is the thing you're going to, well, what's outside with the selector is what you're selecting in the HTML. So this is selecting an A tag. What's inside the curly braces is how you're going to change the A tag. And that's done by declaring a property and a value. And there's all sorts of properties. So we'll see that there's lots of different properties. Here, I'm changing the background color of that A tag and I'm making it yellow. So that's the basic anatomy. That's how you write out a style. And then I will go in here. So the basic idea then is you have your selector. Oops, that got messed up. But you have your selector here. P and M are selectors. This affects the P tag and the M tag in your HTML, and that's the output that changes. So here it's making the M tag and the P tag have a black background. So there's different types of selectors, and I have a couple of videos here. So if you watch these videos, they'll tell you how these work. There's a universal selector, which will affect everything. And like I said, the videos are kind of works in progress, but the class selector is probably what you'll use most often. And you have an ID selector, which is similar to a class selector. Class selectors start with periods, and ID selectors start with number signs. And then when you use the ID selector, you use the word ID equals to whatever you name that selector. And ID selectors are meant to be used only once, and class selectors can be used multiple times. So next I have what a declaration is and what goes inside the curly brace. So there's some notes here. You can have multiple declarations in a curly brace, in those curly braces. And as you saw earlier, it's a property and a value. So you'll see more examples of that here. So when we go into this styling for fonts, I have a bunch of properties here. So there's a font family property. So that will let you change the type of font you're using. There's a font style property, which basically makes something italic. And there's a video for that one. Font size you'll use. It makes your text bigger or smaller. You can give that a percentage. You can give it a pixel measurement. You have a text align. Now you have spacing in between, so that's with line height. And then text color. And I'll include more examples here, but text color is one that you'll use a lot, and it's just the word color, colon, and then the type of color. And you have, you can pick names for your colors. There's a hexadecimal notation, and RGB is another notation as well. In brackets, you can actually pick the colors, and it will pick the number for you. So just something about the units. So when you're having the size set using that font size property, you have a whole range of units you can use. So you can use what's called absolute units, and then you can use something called relative units. And relative units are basically multipliers that will change when you make the web page bigger or smaller. For example, you can have a percentage. If it's set to 50%, then the size of the fonts, let's say, will be at a ratio of half the size of the page because it's set to 50%. But absolute units are set, so you can use inches if you wanted to. And you can try them here by clicking on the little try it button, and it actually goes to W3 schools where you can actually see that in action. So I have an H1 with a font size of 1.5 centimeters, and that's the size. And then that H1 and the style tag is affecting the H1 tag down below. And that's the basic idea of how that works. So you can try these out. It's just linking to W3C and the code that they have set there. This goes into a little bit more detail about what an M unit is. When we get into responsive design, we'll use these more, but I'm just kind of showing you this now. For your assignment, you can stick with pixels, points, even centimeters or inches if you wanted to, and just keep the sizes absolute. You'll want to look into this font property shorthand. So this is something where instead of using multiple properties, you can just use the word font, colon, and there's an order here. So if you say italic bold, 12 pixels over 30 pixels, 12 is the size, 30 is the space in between. And the term is leading. It's a graphic design term. And then you can pick the font name and font family after that. When you have a comma after that font name, basically that means that it's going to default to whatever font is on the computer. So if the person who's looking at that web page doesn't have the font Georgia, it will automatically default to whatever Sarah font they want. But it's here in the video. If you watch that video, it's detailed in there. There's also something called a font face rule. And what you can do with this is actually come up with a keyword. So under the font face rule in curly braces, you have font family, colon, and my first font is just a random word. It can be anything. And then you have a source, and that's actually pointing to a font file that you would include in a folder next to your images folder in your directory structure for a project. And then in your style, you would have that font family again, and you would reference that word that you pick. And now this P tag is going to use this font called sensation underscore light wolf, WOFF, and that's the format. You can use true type fonts, open type fonts, which are kind of common for Macs and PCs now. This web open font format is a little bit older. It's not necessary to use that, but you'll find true type fonts and open type fonts out there. Kind of a little bit more advanced to start using this, but if you really want to use a particular font, you can using this font face. And this is giving you some places to find some fonts if you want to find web fonts. And then this is kind of a reference to just different styles that you can apply to type. So, you know, changes the font family will change the font. You know, changes font size, changes font size. Changes boldness, font weight, changes boldness. So you can kind of use this as a reference. This is basically, you know, snippets of code demonstrating that particular type of style for the web typography. And then we have the assignment. So image dominant page, 80% of the page should be images, 20% should be words. Try out the 3 different file formats for images for the web, JPEG, GIF, and PNG. Use a background color or texture. And then type dominant, 80% should be type. But the type dominant page use a combination of CSS typography and Photoshop text. Use short paragraphs. Use layered type. So I'll show you that in Photoshop. I actually have a video that I'm going to include on this tonight that runs through it along with this video. But the final deliverable is going to be the screenshots of the web pages, save them as PNGs, which is the default screenshot format for a screenshot if you're on a Mac anyways, I think as Windows as well, and the text for the HTML file like we've done before. So let me go here. And so this is in Photoshop. So this would be a good example of type dominant. So I have type all over the place. An example of image dominant, if I hide some of this, and hide this, you could call this one image dominant. So I have a little bit of type, and then I have a lot of images. So the way I created both of these is I have my images in the image folder for my image dominant page. Here I have a bunch of images reflecting on the pocket operator. Something simple. I'm just repeating it a bunch of times. It's like I'm making a collage. Actually, I have this extra images folder. I'm gonna copy these and throw them here. Then get rid of that folder because I don't need that. So I have my images and I have an index.html. So if I go into brackets and this is my image dominant web page. Now, I only have 2 images in here, so it's pretty simple. The top half and the bottom half. You can have more if you want. There's no limit. The idea is you're just using the image source tag, and I have this design I created. So I created the design by going into Photoshop, and I'll start one from scratch. Actually, I want to do one thing. And you can see this is the idea with the image the type dominant page is just a lot of type, right? And real quick, I'm gonna switch back. I have this book called Typography Now. So it's kind of full of, this is actually from the 90s, so it's pretty old, kind of right when Photoshop came out. But there's some really good examples of like, you know, type dominant. I don't know if you can see that good. Is it big enough on the screen? I might have to take some photos of this because I don't even know if, you know, there's not like a digital version of it. But there's all sorts of, I mean, even this is type dominant. Typography is huge. Or, you know, there's all these different examples. Like that is overtaking the page. It's all type based. An example of, and this actually has a lot of type dominant images in here. It was kind of the 90s, and designers were really playing with type and Photoshop, doing all sorts of interesting things. here is another great example. Looks like a Dada, something from the Dadaist movement, but it was a poster from like the late 80s, early 90s, 1989. So that's 1989. And these things are explorations because in the 90s, digital software was just becoming popular. Here's another one. This is Ed Fella. He's the chair of design. At least he was like 5 years ago at Cal Arts. The book is full of really type dominant type explorations. Now, an example of more image dominant, let me just grab something here, is in this book, you'll see all sorts of image dominant type images. So this is Genius Moves, Stephen Heller. It's a collection of like tropes in graphic design. So like here, this New York World's Fair poster is a great example of image dominant. You have one line of text and you have that huge illustration. Then you have something like this, poster for Cranbrook Ceramic School. Image dominant, there's some type up there, but it really focuses on these images that fill the page. In web design, there's this concept called the Jumbotron, where the image fills the whole page. So you see a lot of that too. A lot of websites is minimalist, not a lot of text, but big image right when you go to the website. Like you go to like Nike's website or you go to Apple's website. You know, good examples. Websites that are text dominant, type dominant are like a lot of news sites, you know, or news aggregators. So you'll find different categories that focus on the two. You know, Reddit is like, you know, type dominant. It's all text, right? Some images flowing in there. So let me go back now to these examples. So again, this is now the image dominant example. But let me kind of start from scratch. So if I'm working on my, let's say, image dominant site, there's some things you can do to make this easy. So I go into Photoshop, I go to new, I pick this default under web. There's a web large, 1920 by 1080 or web most common. So let's say, it doesn't really matter. I'm not giving you a size, just standard web page size. So I'll pick web most common. And then here, what I'll do is I'll start collecting my images and placing them in here. So one of the things you can do, there's different ways to do this. If I go into images, I can grab all of these. I think I can just drag them right into Photoshop. So drop and drag, now they're in Photoshop. And then, actually only there's one. Oh, there you go. It's doing image by image. And then every time a new image is placed, I just double click. So it's kind of populating the layers with the images.
I didn't know you can do that. Oh, okay.
So there's so many different ways. So dragging and dropping, and it sounds like this is a very easy way to do it. There's another technique called loading files in the stack. So I actually have it in the video for the assignment, which I'll post after I do this one. So there's another video which goes through the whole assignment, similar to what I'm doing here. So if you go to File, you can go into Scripts, and there's something called Load Files in the Stack. And basically what that does is it brings up this Load Files dialog. You browse, you find a folder that has a bunch of images in it. You hit Open, and this will actually do it, but hit Open, and select what you want to load. So let's say these three. And actually, it'll take each one of these now, hit OK, and it's like adding them one by one. So you can do it manually with the drag and drop from a folder, or you can do this load files in the stack. You can also do file place embedded, but you have to do each one individually. It doesn't let you select one.
Yeah, I know that one, but I didn't know you can do the other one.
Yeah, place embedded is tedious.
Yeah.
If you have 100 images, it'll take forever, right? So dragging and dropping, load files in the stack is totally automated, which is nice. So let's say now this is going to be my image dominant site. I have the width set. I think it was 1360 pixels. I'm going to go into the artboard tool and make it a little bit taller, just to simulate the idea that I can scroll through this. So image dominant is going to be easy. I do want you to like kind of play with design. Like here, if it's for this pocket operator, which is my focus, think about different design principles, like kind of making that huge is a lot of fun. Picture this website for the pocket operator. This is a photo taken with my iPhone. So making that huge and maybe adding something else on top. Let's see. And here, I'm just playing with the design, so I will make a selection here, and then I have a marquee selection, and then I'm going to hit the mask button, kind of have it, kind of something going all the way across. And then if this is image dominant, you still need a little bit of text. So I'm adding some text here, and I will make that text white. Oops. So let's say this is going to be like my image dominant website. So now I can export this as a huge image. It's way too big. If you look at it, this is 22 megs. So images for the web, it's still a good idea to keep them relatively small, under a megabyte. Everything's faster now. You're going to have 5G internet, but still, you don't want huge, crazy images. So the way to get around that is there's a tool in Photoshop that's actually kind of like a throwback tool before CSS, when people were putting things into tables. So it's this slice tool. If you don't see the slice tool, click on the 3 dots here, go to Edit Toolbar, restore the toolbar. It's underneath the crop tool. So once you restore that toolbar, it's there. And what you can do with this is you can cut sections. So I have one section, I have 2 sections, and actually I think I made section, let's see. So I want this top section here. And I don't know why it's making more. Oops, I already have a big section on top. So let me So what you can also do with this is you can grab this slice select tool. I already had this big selection here, so you can should be able to adjust. This. Let's see if I can. I don't want this big slice on top. All right, let me see, I'm just gonna cut this up then. I'm not gonna worry about these other sections. Looks like I had an extra slice there. But you'll see numbers. So here there's a number 3. There's a number 5. Here there's a number 6 for these 3 sections that go horizontally. Now you can do vertical cuts, but for this assignment, you have to stick with horizontal things because we aren't styling the images in terms of their placement yet. So there's a whole set of style sheets for just placing things on the page. We'll learn more about that in the next unit. Here we're just cutting the images to make them smaller for our purposes because you don't want huge images for the web. So now that I have these slices, what I can do is go to File, go to Export, but you have to use this Save for Web Legacy. This is where you can actually save each section as a different image. So I have image 1 on top, image 2, and image 3. Oh, I guess it fixed it for me somehow. So, okay, I got these 3 images. So you can click on each one of these. So I click on image 1. You can save each one as a different format. So I can save one as a JPEG. Click on image 2, save it as a PNG. Image 3, let's just save that as a PNG too. So once you're happy with that, you're going to save each one as an individual image now. Go to Save. Go here. I got to find the right folder. So this is for image dominant. Then add them into your images. One thing that this does, though, is that it actually creates a folder called images for you automatically. That's something that this export legacy does for some reason. That's fine. So I'll call these PO for pocket operator. And then it will add a number to the end. So it will say about a PO-1, a PO-2, and a PO-3. So you hit, and the other thing though is make sure when you have slices here, you say all slices and then hit save. So just save those. Now if I go into my folder, it created its extra images folder. So they're actually here. What I would do is go here, copy these, go up into your main images folder, paste them, and then delete that extra images folder. It's okay if you keep it, but you have another images folder that you would have to go down into a layer. Just have one. So I have PO1, PO2, and PO3. So I go back now into my image dominant page. And so I have an image tag. Image tag src for the source tag equals, in quotes, pick my images folder, find PO1, close that. And here I'm just gonna copy and paste.
啊，也没有别人。
And
Oh shit.
my second image tag and my third image tag. And then I'll change these to match the names. So this one was called PO_2 PNG. And this one was PO_3 PNG. Hit save, click on my lightning bolt in brackets. And this is just using the boilerplate code again. there are my images. Now you see how they're not kind of stacked the way I want them to? Well, that's just the way things are for now because we're not using any CSS to organize this yet. But this would be considered my image dominant website. Now, you can always go back here and make some adjustments. Maybe, oh, I forgot I had text. Didn't I have text on top of there?
Yes.
Must have undid it.
Make music.
Yeah, I thought I had. I thought I had some text on there. I must have undid it. This, I mean, I'm doing this awfully quickly as well, so I can put the text back in there now. So everything is done in Photoshop. Even the text is done in Photoshop. For the type-heavy one, some of the text use CSS. So use a combination of Photoshop and CSS. For the type-heavy one, you know, one of the things you might want to do is actually explore and experiment. So maybe you have your words go in a different direction. The other thing you can do is you can take the image heavy one and you can just go into the shape tool and pick a white fill for the stroke. That's your outline. Hit this red diagonal. That means no stroke. And then you can start to add, and maybe I'll change the color to, you can start to add these like fields like this. You know, and that's going to right away help cut down on the amount of image you have in there. And maybe I even add oops, I want to make that darker. And this is just kind of doing almost like this collage, but instead of your image, your type dominant one is more of a collage with type. And then what I'll do with this is actually I'll make this here. Let's see. And maybe I'll add some more text on here. So for the type 1 too, you're going to have to maybe write a paragraph text, or you can just play with the text in a kind of like an exploratory way. I don't know, just kind of having fun with it. For the type heavy one, if you looked at that book I had where things get really crazy, this book I showed you earlier, a lot of times what they're doing is they're taking a layer, scaling it up, maybe putting it on the top, and then going into the blend modes, which is in the upper left-hand corner. Starting, you have the word normal, and then you can kind of play with these. If you want to scroll through them really quickly, you go into your move tool, hit V. Then on a Mac, you hit Shift Option plus sign. On a PC, hit Shift Alt plus sign, and you can kind of go through the blend modes. So, like, here's a cool one, overlay. It kind of gives that faded effect. So you'll see a lot of stuff like this in like 90s poster design, where they're just taking pieces of an image repeating it. And then let's see, and right on top, I'll add another kind of rectangle here. So let's say this is kind of, this is becoming my image dominant page. For this, I'll go ahead and use these slices again. But I'll add one more. So I'm going to go in here. And oops, that was not a good one. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe I'll add another one here. So I got 5 slices. Now I'm going to slice it up, and then I'm going to bring it into the type one. And then my CSS type can maybe go inside this white band area. So I'm going to go back up here into File, Export. Remember, you got to use Save for Web Legacy. You'll use this Save for Web Legacy for other things. Basically, what happened with Photoshop is they created the new export, and it omitted a lot of the functionality from the Save for Web Legacy, so that's why it's still there. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to pick my slices. Okay, I got a JPEG there. So, all right, so I got my different slices. I'll go to Save. I will find my image type dominant folder for my type dominant web page for the project. I'll give it a name of music. Save here. Now, if I look inside my type dominant folder under images, kind of saved it twice. So I'm going to copy these, have it on the upper images folder, and just delete this images folder here. So now if I go back up, or if I look at it this way, I got my index and then my images for the project. So for the type dominant one, I'll go ahead and open that index.html. So here I already have a style sheet set. I'll go down here and I'll start to add my images. So I will find that music one. They're all PNGs, so I can select the first one and then copy and paste, and then just change the numbers at the end here. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then save, and then I'll look at it. And so let me scale it up. So that's the web page. So I created this kind of very abstract looking web page. Let's see. So the second image here is just white. So instead of using that, I'm going to delete it, and then I'll put a p tag in here. And this is where I'll be adding my text. So I'll just say, I'll just so I got my text in here. And then I'm going to repeat this a bunch of times just to fill up the space. Hit save. Now I have a p tag in here, and I have a style sheet already set in the style tag. So that style sheet is for this p tag. So whenever I have a p tag in the HTML, this will affect it. So here I have a font size being changed to 100 pixels. I have a font family. It's going to take this and change it to sans serif. So it's going to be the geometric font without the little lines sticking out at the ends of the letter forms. And the color, I picked cornflower blue. When you type out the word color for the style, it automatically, let me spell it right. It automatically creates this list of colors. So these are all the web colors that you have available. So I pick cornflower blue. I'll pick a different one. I'll pick dark blue. And then you end that with a semicolon. That's important. So each one of these inside the curly braces is a property. You know, so each property does something different. In brackets, the properties are purple, and the values are going to be different colors depending on what type of value. So a number value is going to be green. Here, where you have this value with a word, it's going to be orange, and the color value, I think that would be orange, but let me see something. So if I change this color to, let's say, aqua, for some reason the color values are blue. So these are your values, and it's being applied to the P tag down here. So when I hit save, click on the lightning bolt, and now I have the website with the images with the text in between. So now I have a combination of image with text and CSS text. Maybe that's a little too big, so maybe I'll change it to half the size. You know, so now the idea now with this is we're only focusing on the CSS for the typography at this point. So if you play with the scale of the web page, you know, when I scale it down, it's fine. When I scale it really big though, my images start to float alongside each other. So in the next unit, we'll start to focus on actual layout of the web page. How can you make things side by side? Even how can you make things layered and do almost like Photoshop types effects where you have translucency, opacity changes, positioning changes, even things scaling up or down as you make that website bigger, but I'm not getting that far yet. I just want you to focus on typography and using some of the different properties for the web-based typography. So any questions?
Is there a drop down for the font family?
No, there's not. So the fonts don't have a drop down. Your default font is chosen by the operating system you're using in the web browser. There's almost like this built-in style sheet for a web browser that has it at default. But if you want to change the font, you're going to have to use the font family. So font family, it works by, there is a drop-down for font family. So, but that's very broad. So it does the broad classification of what type of font. So you have cursive, fantasy, inherit, monospace, sans serif, and serif. So these are all default fonts already in your system. So for example, like the default sans serif font on a PC is Arial, and the default sans serif, I don't know if it's still Verdana, but on a Mac it's Verdana. Monospace is usually Courier. I don't know what fantasy is. When you ever see the word inherit, it's basically if you have a P tag within another P tag, it's inheriting the style of the thing that comes before it. But here we're just using really sans serif and serif. Now you can put a font name in here. So instead of saying serif, I could pick a font. So Georgia is a font, and then you have a comma there, and then you say sans serif after that. And what that means is if you don't have Georgia, if the person viewing the web page doesn't have Georgia, then it's going to default to whatever sans serif they have on their system. So whenever you have those commas set up, it's just defaulting to another font if they don't have the font. Now, the one thing you can do though, and this is something to think about, it's actually, I have to add this to Canvas. so I'm going to add this, is you can use something called web fonts or Typekit fonts. So basically, these are fonts that are being served on a server, on a big server farm, like Google's server farm or even Amazon or Microsoft. And you're having a link to point to that. And the way this works is you can go to Google Fonts. So I have the list of the different and Scroll Fonts, Google Fonts, and Adobe Typekit, most popular, but most font foundries have these web fonts now. And go to Google Fonts. Oh, not GitHub. Go to Google Fonts, and you have a bunch of fonts here. And you find one that you like. Let's say I like Lobster. You click on Lobster, it brings up that web font. If I like this, I can say select that style, or you can go to download family. No, actually, here for this example, okay, I like that style. And then you can go to under, let me get out of this. Let me go back into select style here. View your selected styles, click on that. I think then you go to embed. So they've changed this. So basically you click on this little icon called view your styles, go to embed. And you have two things here. You have this link reference, which is a tag, and you have this CSS rule. So you cut and paste this link reference. So I copy that, I go to my web page, and that goes outside of the style tag. So that's another tag, a link tag, but it's pointing to Google's server, and it's pointing to the font Lobster on that server. And then you go into the CSS rule section, you copy this. So it's just the font family property, which we were using for Georgia and sans serif. But instead of having Georgia and sans serif now, I'm going to cut and paste that whole font family here. Hit save. And now when I look at that web page, it's going to have that font Lobster. There it is. Now it's in between those two sections. So now I have the font Lobster there. So that's using, let me put this side by side. So that's using a web font from a server. You're not actually saving the web font into your directory structure for the website, but you actually can. Then that would be using @fontface to reference that. I'm just gonna change this color to dark red. Now it's dark red. Maybe play with line height. Oh, less. Spread it out. So there's all these things you can do now, but I'm combining, the Photoshop collage with the type, with actual type using CSS. And that's basically the assignment. You got the two, you got same subject matter, but one is mostly all images, one is mostly all text, but you're kind of doing a collage type exploration and then bringing it all together in Photoshop, in the web page. And you don't have to use the slice tool. You could do it in sections. You could use the artboard method like we did with banners. You can think of it in different ways. So maybe I have different artboards for different sections. However you want to do it in terms of your workflow, it's up to you.
So you don't want us to create it in Photoshop and then put it into the website and using different fonts and stuff. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, you can do it any way you want. You can create it in Photoshop. There might be some things where Photoshop is the only option for you. You know, like having vertical text if you want to have that look go alongside the side. Like, what if you want to have diagonal text? You can do it with CSS eventually, but it's like too much to learn all at once. So, you know, your cheat is to always like go back to Photoshop and maybe use Photoshop for some of these things. Which you might even do if you're designing and you did have the CSS for it. Maybe you do want to just cheat it and use Photoshop to get you what you want. So it's just a matter of learning both methods, but you can use either one for this assignment. But a lot of your more complex compositing and changing angles of things will have to be done in Photoshop for now.
Okay, so our assignment, okay, so we have to do one with font and one with image dominant.
Yeah, so yes.
So then we go into Photoshop and we can do what you did here.
Yes.
And then so we don't have to slice it. We can just embed it, the image into the so it's not bracket anymore, right? We're using a different.
You're using brackets to create the web page, but using
Okay.
Photoshop to create like the collage for the web page.
Okay. And what is CSS again? Sorry.
And CSS is your, it's called the cascading style sheet. So if you go through the unit, it kind of goes through the beginning of what a style sheet is.
Okay.
And how to create the code for it. So if you go back to this example here with brackets, that you have a style tag and your style sheet goes inside the style tag. So if you go back, I'll create a new HTML file. So
you want us to in bracket in our HTML file, we should have some kind of style and fonts.
yeah, start to just to kind of explore and experiment with different styles. So here, like here's my plain web page, and this is my boilerplate. Well, inside that head tag is the style tag. And then, so this is where you can create your styles. So if I have like an H1, you know, you know, it's happy birthday. So, yeah, you have some text here. Let's say you want to make the happy birthday green and bigger than an H1. So in your style tag, you can do a couple things. You can just reference the H1. You type H1, and then in curly braces, you start to explore these properties. And the properties I have on, you can use this reference. So you got color, let's say, or you can go through
font family.
yeah, you can go through this. So I'm just going through this. Here I have.
So you can change the font size and it's fonts.
Yeah, so you have your font properties. So these are all font properties. Font style, font size,
Got it. Okay.
line height.
Okay. So if you want to do that for the paragraph, you just put P in there and then put in whatever size and color.
So let's say, let me do this H1 first. So let's say I want to change the color to green, and then font size. 120 pixels. And then let's say I had a P tag. And then it had, you know, information inside. Information. So if I wanted to, first let's look at it. So if you look at the web page, happy birthday is huge because I made the size 120 and it's green. Information here has no style applied. It's like the default P tag.
Right.
So now if I want to change that one, I add a P tag, add your curly braces, and let's say I want to make that one red, and maybe make the size a little bigger, but not as big as the H1. So maybe I do 90. Save. Now it's a little bit bigger and different color. If I put these side by side, it's easier too. Oops.
Mm.
So if we make it 140. Oh, and I screwed up. It has to be font size, not just size. So now it's 40 pixels in size and it's red. Or I can change this to tan. You know, so you're seeing how the color changes as I change the value of the word color.
Yes.
You know, pink. So yeah, so this is the style sheet
Oh, okay.
and the style tag.
Mm.
And then these names up here are looking into the body of the HTML to see if there's an H1. So this, they also call these rules, so style rules. So this rule right here with the H1 is now looking into the body and finding an H1, and then it's saying, oh, okay, there's an H1, I'm gonna make the color green.
Mm.
So you just gotta get used to this, you know, the nomenclature of how this works. It's a selector, the first word outside the curly braces is called the selector. That's what you're selecting. And then inside the curly braces is your property and your value. That's what you're declaring that selector to be. So here the selector is looking for an H1, and then the declaration is going to make that H1 green and 120 pixels in size.
Got it.
So yeah, it takes some time to get used to. But you know, you start with your boilerplate and then you add that style tag, and then you can, I mean, you can even go into the canvas and cut and paste some of those examples and then bring them in to see what they look like.
Okay, got it. Okay, so we can create our image in Photoshop and then go in here and play with the font and the
Yeah.
color. Okay.
Yep. You can, you know, explore Photoshop more and do some collage and then bring those back in as separate images and then combine it in the HTML. It's an exploration of how you want to approach it, really.
Oh, okay. So you say we should incorporate this into our collage, our image, the style.
No, I mean, the style is separate, right? So
Mhm.
the style right now is just for text. We're only doing typography. We're not using styles in the images.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, so that's it. So do you have any questions?
No, I think I'm getting what you're wanting us to do.
Yeah, I'll put this video. I have another video that I'll post. And then if you look at both videos, I think they'll help you, but you can always ask questions. This is due in 2 weeks, so there's plenty of time to work on this.
Okay. But I mean, like your example earlier, you put a blank area that you can
Yeah, so
the font and stuff like that. So is that kind of what you want us to do? I mean,
you don't have to do it like that, but
okay.
for me, it's just using the rectangle tool to add these blank sections. So then I can go into the web page and fill those sections in with text.
Oh, okay. Okay, but we don't have to. We can just play with our paragraph and our H1 separately from image.
Yeah, you don't have to.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah, so okay, so that's really it. So there'll be more information on Canvas for this unit. So just kind of keep your eye out. I'm going to add more videos in there as well. So if you have any questions, just reach out to me on Discord or whatever you want. So okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Jillian. All right. Have a good night.
Good night.